Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Give it another minute or so and we'll get started. Thank you all for attending today. Okay, we've got a good group of folks that have come in, and I'm sure some others will join. But for the sake of time and staying on schedule, we'll go ahead and get started. So, again, thank you all for coming in today and attending the webinar on unlocking pasture potential with white clover. My name's Sam Ingram. I'm with Corteva AgriScience. I'm a field scientist that covers the eastern U.S., and my job really entails bringing new products, new solutions, like one we'll talk about today, Novagraze herbicide, to the market to our end users, our farmers and ranchers. So, really good schedule we've got lined up today as far as content covered. Myself, I'll be talking. We also have Brandy Buzzard here with us today, owner operator out there in Kansas of High Bar Cattle Company. She's going to speak directly to Novagraze herbicide and what she has learned from using that product over several years. Dive a little deep into when we launch products into the market, we get these out beyond just small pot research trials. We take it out to producers like Brandy and others to see how it works in the real world. So really excited to have Brandy with us today to speak on her experiences with Novagraze herbicide. So that's part of our talk, but the more detailed agenda, we're going to start off just talking about the benefits of white clover, being a legume. In general, we could talk about the benefits of all legumes, but we're going to focus in on white clover today and talk about the economics of it, where that benefit comes from, the agronomic side of having a legume like white clover in your stand. We're going to talk about the animal health performance and improvements there when you have the addition of white clover. And once we wrap up that talk on the benefits of it, we're going to look at, well, if I've got white clover, how can I manage maybe some of this weed encroachment that we see? Because we've known for far too long, if folks wanted to keep a legume in their system like white clover, annual lespedeza per se, we haven't really had a lot of options for broadleaf weed control. Now we do with Novagraze herbicide, and we'll talk about what that product is, what it can do for us, and then just like I mentioned, we'll talk about the real world experiences of Brandy Buzzard there. And then we'll wrap it up with questions and discussion. And just a little bit of housekeeping there. If you do have questions, you can see down there on the lower bar, you can see the Q&A function. If you would utilize the Q&A section there for your questions, not the chat. Let's put all our questions in the Q&A function because we've got folks on our side helping us try to figure out if we're going to answer those via text or we're going to answer them live here. So if you have questions, hopefully you do. We want this to be a good discussion and informative to you all. Put them in the Q&A function. We'll get those answered. If we don't have enough time, we will follow up with you via email to answer that question for you. So with that, let's dive into it. Just as I said, we're going to talk about the benefits of white clover being a legume. Many of you are probably aware of having a legume in your forage stand and the benefits of it. We're going to focus in on white clover today. And to start us off, we're going to talk about the economic benefit. So, we're in the middle of winter meetings, or at least where I'm located at in the Southeast. We're having a lot of winter meetings that we've gone to over the past month or so, 6 weeks. And from what I'm hearing, fertilizer prices are firm and they're consistent across the board with some of the out the door prices somewhere around 65 cents per pound of nitrogen. So when we think about legumes, and that's a real cost if we're going to put fertility down. When we think about legumes, one of the major benefits that we have with a legume is its ability to fixate its own nitrogen. And depending on what legume we have, depending on environmental stresses or moisture, those type of things, we can get up to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year, specifically from white clover. And if you put a number with that, so this table here at the bottom is adapted from our Southern Forages book, where we lay out some prices of nitrogen per pound and how much you can fixate. So again, that depends on how much of white clover is present in the field, what the environmental impact is looking like there. But if we just go, say we only fixate about 100 pounds of nitrogen in that field, and again we set that price at 65 cents per pound of nitrogen, that is a savings of $65 an acre just by having that legume in the field. So that's a big number, I would say, even with where prices are here. So that's a good cost savings for our farmers and our ranchers. Now, looking at the agronomic benefits, when you think about a legume being a forb compared to, say, a grass, when you look at that, we're going to have higher crude protein numbers, anywhere from we can go upwards of 25% crude protein. So when we think about that transitioning to nitrogen, putting on pounds of beef, or depending on what your livestock species is out there, putting on pounds of gain on that animal over the total acre is going to improve for sure. And then the digestibility is improved compared to a lot of our grasses for sure, because we just have more leaf compared to the shoot ratio. So there's higher crude protein numbers, which is a good thing for performance. But the big thing here is digestibility. So that animal is actually able to digest more, consume more, and then convert that to pounds produced per acre. Then when you think about some of the nutrient components of it, with some of these legumes, specifically white clover, having higher calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, that's going to help us too, depending on where that animal is in its production life cycle. All right, and then the animal health component. When we look at this, so we know it improves our animal performance. Here, that when we just talked about the agronomic performance, when we look at animal performance here specifically, all that translates from the higher crude protein, higher total digestible nutrients into improved gains. So this study here in our bottom table, this is looking at tall fescue system. Now this is what you would call hot fescue or endified infected Kentucky 31 tall fescue. When you look at fescue, the tall fescue plus ladino clover, which is a white clover type, when you compare that just to a tall fescue system plus nitrogen, you can see the difference here is about a half pound of gain on those steers, daily gain per day. So a half pound ADG. And then really, as I think about where the market is and what folks are doing, farmers and ranchers are trying to maximize total gain on that given acre that they have, that they either own or they're leasing. They want to maximize that total acre. You can see there's a 100-pound difference on the total. There's a 100-pound difference on the steers there. But when you look at the total gain per acre, that last column, we're looking at about 200 pounds, 200 plus pounds more on that acre, which is a huge transition, huge jump from a given acre, especially in the market that we're looking at. So I'm big on breaking that down from the numbers. I'm definitely not an economist, but I do like looking at the numbers because they make sense to me. If we just take that last column there, and for the tall fescue plus nitrogen system, they gain 370 pounds on that given acre. And the tall fescue plus ladino clover, white clover, they gain 582 pounds to the acre. Now, depending on where you're located throughout the country, these prices may differ, but I just chose a local sale barn here in Georgia, last week's sale on 5 weight number one steers. Okay, and they were $4.50 a pound, which is a really great thing. I tell you, I leveraged this slide from another slide or another presentation I did about 3 years ago, and I think we were averaging like $2 per pound. So it's just crazy where the market is, and it's an absolute great thing. But you look at $4.50 a pound. We're leaving, if we were only looking at that tall fescue system versus not having the white clover in our pastures, we're looking at $1,000 difference per acre. Those are real numbers, and that's a big difference between the two. So obviously the white clover component there is going to be a big one. All right, so more talking about the benefits of the white clover in the pasture. When we look at the animal health side of it, when I break it down simply, it's just improving that body condition score of that animal, getting her on a higher, when we're talking about brood cows, mama cows, getting her on a higher plane of nutrition to set her up for breeding back. Because at the end of the day, if we're not dropping calves on the ground, have healthy calves for a cow calf operation, then she's costing us money. Okay, so a lot of times when we incorporate white clover, looking at specifically the fescue belt on some of these scenarios here, when we were looking at incorporating white clover into a toxic endophyte infected tall fescue system, adding legumes is the most common strategy to alleviate that fescue toxicosis. And here we'll look at some specific numbers. A study done by Gary Lacefield and company that they leverage out of Illinois and Indiana. So for cow-calf enterprises, so for those non-cow-calf enterprises, stay with me here, just talking about the impact of incorporating white clover. But as we can see here, overall, when we think about having that legume in there with improved agronomics, improvement of crude protein digestibility, we know we're going to get that animal on a higher plane of nutrition. She's going to get a better body condition score, which translates to breeding back faster, helping with the conception rates, and then when she has that calf, milking and weaning weights carry over. If we just focus in on conception rates, this is a little bit older study, but one that was done in Illinois and Indiana. So as you walk through this table here, our first column is going to be the pasture. Our second column is the conception rate, and third column is where it took place. So 2 studies, one done in Illinois, one done in Indiana, same treatments. So we had endophyte infected tall fescue, and the conception rate on that first treatment was 75%. Okay, when we incorporated white clover into this system, that's that next line, we improved conception rate up to 89%. That was just for the state of Illinois. All right, when you follow down to Indiana, followed the same trend. Numbers were a little bit different, but same trend. All right, endophyte infected tall fescue around 72% conception rate. Endophyte tall fescue plus white clover, 92%. That's a 20% bump there in the state of Indiana. All right, so if we look at this, take the averages, say, again, I like putting the numbers to real world. Say you have 100 brood cows, 75% conception rate, that's 75 calves on the ground. Versus if we just have white clover in that system, in the tall fescue system, endophyte infected, this is more conservative at the 89%. On 100 cows, that's 89 calves. Okay, so we can go back and do the same math. If we were trying to sell 14 more calves at $4.50 a pound on 5 weights, that's a lot of money across the board if we're incorporating this here. So it makes sense when we can, and when it's in the right system to incorporate some of these legumes like white clover. All that being said, we've heard for a long time before I came on with Corteva, well, if I'm going to have a legume like white clover in my system, I'm not going to be able to utilize a herbicide because it's going to take out that white clover. So I'm just going to have to deal with the weeds. Well, fortunately, now we have Novagraze herbicide, one that we launched last year, had really good experiences with it in the year of 2025, and we expect the same for 2026 as we continue to roll this thing out and get more folks, get this solution into more farmer and ranchers' hands. All right, so what is it? Just to talk a little bit about the product attributes, it's Novagraze herbicide preserves white clover and annual lespedeza, just those two. So a lot of times we'll get questions, well, what about this legume? What about red clover? What about crimson clover? It's just for white clover and annual lespedeza. So we want to set the stage there that we're very focused in on white clover and annual lespedeza only, no other legumes. And what it does is it maintains those two in comparison to say something like a batwing mower that you would, remove weed pressure, but you're also going to remove a lot of standing forage that you want to. So it's a great option for us when only really people either dealt with it or they broke out the rotary mower. And in comparison to 2,4-D, Novagraze offers more broad spectrum weed control compared to 2,4-D alone. Dive a little bit deeper, and we're not going to go through the whole entire label, but some of the things that we want to call out that you should all be aware of before utilizing this herbicide on a given acre. Some things that would be of interest to people. It's a non-residual product. So when I say non-residual, it has no soil residual activity. So that allows us for flexibility depending on what we want to do with that pasture, if it's going to be transitioned into a different crop. So shorter plant back intervals, when we think about forage grasses, you can go 14 days behind a Novagraze herbicide application. For forage legumes, 30 days. All other crops, it's a 90-day crop rotation. So this just gives flexibility to those that honestly they don't know what's going to happen to that acre in the next year, 2 years down the road. You have this product, and we know that it doesn't have to sit into perennial grass systems or pastures that are intermingled with white clover annual lespedeza. Okay, so the typical use rate for Novagraze herbicides is going to be 24 fluid ounces. That's what the general recommendation is going to be across the board, especially as I think about right now as we're warming up in the southeast, and it's going to continue on up as you go further into the center of the country. 24 fluid ounces plus 1% MSO. We're going to talk about that. Is going to do a great job on a lot of those winter weeds that we're trying to clean up, whether it be on a hay field or in a pasture situation. 24 fluid ounces is the primary use rate, but we can go up to 48 ounces in a single application. But just know that we're maxed out at 48 ounces for a given year. So 48 ounces is our max use rate. 24 fluid ounces is what we're going to go with most of the time. Okay, so I just mentioned MSO requirement, methylated seed oil, 1% volume per volume of a straight MSO is going to be required for this mixture. So we need that with Novagraze to make sure that we're on label, but maintaining good, consistent control across the weed spectrum that we have on the label. Again, never too many times to call out. We're just preserving white clover and annual lespedeza, no other clover varieties. So let's stay focused on those. And if you're familiar with Ultigraze, our pasture weed and feed product line, we're not going to put Novagraze on Ultigraze within the Ultigraze pasture weed and feed program. That's for some of our other products. Okay, so let's look at some of the data that we've done here. This is actually from two different sites in Wisconsin. So just to set these trials up and these graphs up for you, broadleaf weed presence on our left-hand side. This is the percent frequency of, in our green would be in the Novagraze herbicide plots, and in the gray, which is kind of that bar behind it, that's in the untreated. So all this is showing you is 30 days, DAT is days after treatment. So percent frequency of broadleaf weeds, how much broadleaf weed is in that plot pretty much. So at 30 days after, we're at 11% on our Novagraze herbicide versus 40%, or 40% of that plot is broadleaf weeds. So we did a great job. This is 30 days after applying 24 ounces. Okay, we did a great job of controlling those weeds 30 days out. And what's really good here to see is as you carry it out to 60 and 90 days for that trial, we're holding those weeds back, where we're releasing probably in this system a tall fescue white clover mix, closing that canopy and keeping a lot of that weed pressure down. So we're maintaining that from 30, 60 to 90. And you can see the broadleaf weed pressure in the untreated is kind of staying the same too. So did a great job initially. And then really when we let that pasture take over with canopy closure, tall fescue, white clover in that mix, maintaining good weed control throughout. On the flip side of that, you say, okay, well, the weed presence, good job, we got that covered. But really, I want to know, how did the white clover respond to it? Okay, so this is percent frequency of the white clover. This is our next chart here on the right-hand side. So 30 days after, we're looking at about 50% of that plot, both in the treated and the untreated, is going to be white clover presence. So even after an overgrazed herbicide, we still have that white clover present. That maintains about true at the 60-day mark. And then we start seeing some more recovery, new trifoliates coming off that crown, and actually bumping up to 60%. Still around 70% for the untreated, but you have to think in your mind. Well, we also have broadleaf weed pressure in those plots too. So doing a good job across the board. All right, so some of the things that we want to call out, some of the weeds that we want to call out that may jump out to you as high anxiety weeds. This is definitely not the whole list. We'll have that on the label when you purchase the product and get ready to put an application out. But when I think about Novagraze and where it does a really good job, especially with things that are coming out now, the buttercup species, our ragweed species, ironweed species, any of the biennial thistles that are in the rosette that are starting to bolt down here in the southeast. For sure, our plantain species, if you have issues with plantain, we're going to do a really good job on that. Anything in the wild carrot family, poison hemlock, parsnip, really good job there. Had a question come in today on wild chicory, what that would do. Really good job there too. All right, so again, that's not the whole list, but things that we want to call out, especially going to be top of mind right now, where we're at in this season. So what to look at for an application? We're going to talk about what Novagraze does from symptomology standpoint of white clover, what to expect, when to expect it, and what recovery looks like. Okay, so white clover is preserved with Novagraze, but we are going to have some yellowing and lodging that occurs after this application. So one thing to look at, 2 weeks post-application, that's going to be, you're going to expect symptomology there. That's what I would call that low point of the white clover from a metabolism standpoint, taking in that herbicide and then recovering from it. 4 to 5 weeks post-application, we're going to have that recovery period take place. All right, some things to do to manage these short-term effects. If we're going to make an application, say just prior to making an application, if we have cattle grazing, and this is another thing to call out, we don't have to remove animals. There's no removal period for them. If we have animals, we can graze down that white clover and that forage grass species that you have in there and remove some of that leaf area. So we reduce the contact with the herbicide and the white clover. That'll help us with a recovery standpoint. And then afterwards, we want to do moderate grazing after this application to reduce the grass competitiveness too. And then obviously, we talked about the benefit of a legume. When you think about a legume making its own nitrogen, that's one of its biggest benefits, one of its where its competitiveness with grasses is that it can make its own nitrogen. So if we put nitrogen out there, we don't want to do that. We want to avoid nitrogen fertilization because then we shift the balance to the competitive advantage to the grass. So let's avoid nitrogen fertilization too, because then we'll get encroachment and we'll actually start seeing the grass outcompete the clover. To hit on it here, now that we've been out and it's been great to hear, we've had folks call, well, what about this variety of white clover? What about this variety of white clover? Have you tested it on this one here? And I would say, in general, the more tolerant to applications, our improved varieties are going to be the ones that are the most tolerant. But across the board, all of them are going to be there. But as you look at this sliding scale, it would go from small, large, and then our intermediates being the most tolerant to that. That being said, we have tolerance across the board. This is just that scale. When we get asked, hey, what about this specific variety? We're going to ask you, okay, well, what type does it fall into? And then we'll give you an answer from there. Okay, again, I like photos. I think a lot of people appreciate it because it gives you a nice visual. To set this up, so we're going to talk about what the response of the white clover looks like after 24 fluid ounces of Novagraze. Just to set the stage here, this is in a pure stand of white clover, 100% pure stand. And I understand that not everybody is going to be dealing with a pure stand. Actually, the majority of folks are going to have, somewhere between probably a 50-50 mix, grass legume mixture, or even more 70-30, 70% grass, 30% legumes. And it's not going to be this dramatic as far as the presence of the white clover, so you're not going to see this as pronounced. But it is a good way to show you from an expectation standpoint what we're going to be dealing with. Okay, so from left to right, just as we read a book, day one, this is the day of application. We're not going to see anything there. Nothing works that fast, right? As we move to 1 week, you can see some lodging, so that laying over and a little bit of yellowing of the leaves. 2 weeks after application, you can see here more of the lodging, more of the yellowing. Okay, this is what I call that low point of where we see the most symptomology of the Nova Grace. Do things get better? Absolutely, they do. As we continue out from this, every 7 days, as you look at week 3, okay, this was done in Missouri, but I think this can be consistent across the board, across the U.S. As you look at week 3, we start to get that recovery. Still have some lodging, some yellowing, but we're getting recovery from those plants coming out. Week 4, things are coming back. We're actually starting to see some blooms happening. And then after week 5, I would say we have full recovery. We see the white clover flowering again, and I would think nobody would be the wiser that we had an application here. And in the back of our mind, keep in mind that this is a pure stand, a really good stand of white clover. What we're not seeing here is the removal of the weeds. So when we remove those weeds, that weed pressure from the canopy, and we take away some of that competition, it's in a mixed sward of grasses and legumes. It's really going to be abundant, and you'll see the benefit of making that application. Okay, so talk about application timing. Nova Grace is most effective when 90% of our target weeds have emerged and they're actively growing. That is because it's a non-residual herbicide. So when you think about probably our cornerstone residual herbicide like Duracor, where it has residual, it can give us some flexibility on timing and control some weeds after making an application. Nova Grace is a non-residual herbicide where we spray what is there, that's going to be the control. So for cool season weeds such as mustistle, buttercup, think about the others early to mid spring. So gearing it up right now, or later this year when we have small emerged plants. If we want to go after that first main flush, we can spray in the fall. All right, some of our warm season weeds such as pigweed species, ironweed, we can go late spring or early summer, depending on what your time frame is, where you're at across the U.S. That's going to be when we want to do. Just remember focusing that non-residual herbicide, we're making an application to the plants they're standing, and that's what we're going to get control of. All right, never too much to call it out a few times. Again, the primary use rate is 24 fluid ounces. That's going to be our go-to rate majority of the time. We can go up to 48 ounces in one single use rate, but then we're maxed out on our use rate per year because we're at 48 ounces. Good recommendation is to run 15 gallons of water per acre, so trying to hit that 15 GPA, getting good coverage there. Again, MSO, that is one that we need to have in here. It's the only adjuvant that should be used. We're not going to substitute organosilicones or NISs or blends for that. We're going to use an MSO, 1% volume per volume, for good consistent control across the board. All right, BMPs, I think this, we want to call this out. We want to delay harvesting that forage for at least 14 days when really want to think about a hayfield situation. If we're spending the money to invest in this product, we want to give it enough time to go to work and control those weeds. So it makes sense to go beyond 14 days, but we're going to delay harvest of those crops beyond 14 days. And again, we don't want to have nitrogen fertilizer in there because it's going to shift the competitive advantage to the grasses versus the legumes. So we're going to pull out nitrogen fertilizer for those legume pastures. One thing I would say is if I'll just back up here, if you're using Novagraze just as a strictly non-residual herbicide, we can absolutely mix it with UAN. If you're using it just for a non-residual in a hayfield or a different scenario. But if it's with legumes and we're trying to preserve white clover, annual Lespedeza, we're not going to have the nitrogen fertilizer. Okay, one question we've gotten several times. What about red clover? So red clover is not one that we're promoting as far as tolerant to a Novagraze herbicide. Just white clover and annual Lespedeza. I know there are some 2,4-D tolerant varieties of red clover that are coming out, but we're not going to recommend that with Novagraze at this time. Okay, that is the end of my talk. And what I wanted to do here now is tee up Brandy Buzzard again with High Bar Cattle Company out in Kansas. Brandy has worked with us for several years, working with Novagraze herbicide. Again, when we're trying to bring these products out, not only do we want to make sure it works in the small plots that we, the field scientists, put out, but we want to take it up to the next level, put it on more acres, work with folks that we know are doing the right thing in the industry, and Brandy is a good example of that. So really want to take this time to give Brandy an opportunity to speak just to how she's dealt with some of the problem weeds, how she's preserved the white clover, how Novagraze fits into her system. So Brandy, I will mute myself and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sam, and to the Corteva Pastures and Range team for having me here. Sam, you should hype me up everywhere I go. That was really nice. Um, we have been using Novagraze, testing it here, both testing and in a full application mode here on our ranch for about 3 or 4 years. I live in Southeast Kansas. We raise purebred and Gelbvieh balancer seed stock. On High Bar Cattle Company. We live about an hour south of Kansas City on the Kansas side, right in the heart of fescue country. And so we can get really concerned about that fescue toxicosis. We really like sowing clover into our pastures because, as we all know, legumes are nitrogen replacing. White clover is a high protein. It's very digestible. Cattle really like it. It improves that animal performance. But again, we've run into the same problems as that our other broad spectrum herbicides, have really burned up the white clover in the past. And so we have really enjoyed seeing how well the Novagraze has worked. We have clover everywhere, and the weed pressure is definitely down over the past few years. You will see that kind of, I remember the first time we tested it and I saw that lodging happening and I was like, oh my, what's happening? But if you have to trust the professionals, trust Sam and the rest of the Corteva team. It does come back in green glory. And we have just really loved having the Novagraze there as a tool that we can use to manage the weed pressure on our ranch here.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brandy, on the expectations, and one that we've told folks, hey, if you want to just be ready, either don't look at it for a while or be ready, be ready to see that symptomology. After that, what would you say is it around that 2 week mark for you that you saw kind of that low point and then recovery happening, just as we saw in the photos there?
Yeah, I would say between 1 and 2 weeks probably is when you kind of start to notice it. And like I said, the first time we used it, I was, like, oh, Jerome was right. This is going to happen. And then the other times in subsequent years, you're just prepared for it, right? So, but then you start to see it come back, and our clover has come back really lush. Like I said, we don't run. I don't remember exact phrase that you used, Sam, but like where it's clover only. I don't have any pastures that are clover only. We're running this as a complementary forage to our fescue in most places. But those clumps of clover that have really taken root and taken off are thick and lush, and just the cattle have just really enjoyed. We've noticed better performance from our calves, and so it's been a really rewarding and beneficial tool for us to have.
So that leads me to think one of the things we talked about is animal performance. You being in the seed stock business, cow calf, can you speak to, have you noticed any changes, minor or major, with your herd as you've increased that clover presence in the fields?
I mean, I can't give you like a significant a p value on how on weaning weights or anything like that, but I mean, the past few years, our weaning weights, I would say overall as a herd, have increased. I can't give you like a number of they've increased 150 pounds or anything like that. But I mean, they have increased. We have the data from the last 10 years of having the seed stock operation with our calves, and we have noticed that the weaning weights are up. We just weaned 2 days ago in the rain and the mud, and our weaning weights are up. So, and I would say last year is the year that we utilized Nova Grays the most broadly across our pastures. And so that would be, I mean, anecdotally, that would mean there'd be more clover coming up in those, thriving in those pastures as well.
Sure. Well, good. That's great to hear that maybe it was part of it for sure. But hey, if we're getting increased weaning weights, that's a good thing,
Yeah.
especially in your situation. What, there in southeast Kansas, so what are your predominant weed species that y'all are going after when you make these Nova Grace herbicide applications?
Oh my. How long do you have for me to name all these? Um, I would say we have a lot of ragweed. That was one when I take a lot of pictures, and so it's really easy to spot ragweed in kind of mixed in things. And so we have a lot of ragweed. Pigweed is pretty prevalent. Um, there's another one amaranth. We have a lot and I have learned through this process that there's like 40 different varieties, probably way more than that than amaranth. But those are three that are kind of right off the top of my head. We have thistles. Always try to get those handled before they become, the thistle that we all know and recognize. So those are four pretty big ones. Cockleburs. I don't know the scientific name for those, but those are a generic name, headache. And so I would say that those are 4 or 5 of the really big ones.
Yeah, and I think you're not there. Those aren't limited to just your area. As you probably
Right.
pointed those out, some folks on the call. I know that when you mention those, I see them on farms when I'm visiting with folks, and it's good to know we're doing a good job controlling those. Um, yeah, as I think about it, and we've got a few moments. Brandy, if you think of anything else, just feel free to chime in here. If you all on the call, if you have any questions utilizing the Q&A, Jerome and Benny Martinez, two of the folks that are our market development specialists there within our team, they're answering a lot of these questions. So thank you, Jerome and Benny. One that is not open or that hasn't been answered, we had a question about sandburrs. So Nova Grace herbicides focused in on broadleaf weeds. It's not going to be an option for sandbur control. So just know that, Tony. But the other thing I will say, as we're thinking about this Q&A, as those questions come in, this webinar is being recorded. If we've got a lot of folks that have asked the question, hey, are we going to be able to review this? Are we going to be able to listen to the recording if, say, somebody wasn't able to make it? If you registered for this via email, we're going to send that out to you, and you'll have a copy of it, so you will be able to review it if you would like that. And it's also going to be on our YouTube page here in probably about 7 days or a week. So look for that too. Some other things, let's see here. Actually, I'm going to continue on. One more thing that I did a poor job on was pushing through the slides because Brandy started talking about weeds and I got excited. So by the numbers, if you want to look more into some of the things we talked about specifically with conception rates, with improving animal performance, or the agronomic side of it from a fertility standpoint with nitrogen fixation, or the agronomics from a quality standpoint, you can go to bythenumbers.corteva.us, and that'll take you there to talk specifically what does preserving white clover or annual Espinosa look like from that standpoint. So you can go there. And then lastly, we get a lot of questions come in. Well, where can I find this product? who would be the best person to talk to about my specific situation. We have a great team across the U.S. Range and pasture specialists. That's our sales team. If you want to go to rangeandpasture.com / specialist, that'll take you directly to who your range and pasture specialist would be. And you can reach out to them and they can get you into contact with somebody who would have this product. So we definitely want to cover that before we got to the wrap up point. A lot of the questions got answered through Jerome and Benny. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. Okay, well now I'm reading this. Okay, efficacy when white clover variety in orchard grass. So Larry Smith, we had a question about a specific white clover variety with orchard grass. So I would say, Larry, on that, depending on the white clover variety, if it's small, large, or intermediate, we're going to have better tolerance with the intermediate types. We're going to have tolerance across the board, but a small and large are right there in the middle, and then our intermediates are more tolerant. And the orchard grass, we're definitely safe on that. So I would expect for that specific white clover variety and orchard grass mix that we're going to have good tolerance across the board. Another one came in, and this is a good one because, it's easy for me to say, hey, do this, don't do that. But in the real world, some things are already taking place, and then you want to know if you can still make an application. So a person here asked if I've already fertilized with triple 19 fertilizer, could I still use this product? Absolutely, you can. There's nothing that prohibits you from putting fertilizer out and then going with a NovaGraze application. It's just if you have white clover in that system, then what we're doing with that fertilizer is promoting the grass over the clover. But there's not going to limit you anyway to not make that application. All right, good deal. Well, we've answered all the questions here. We're right at about 45 minutes into the deal. We had a whole hour, but if we don't have any more questions coming in, we're not going to keep you for sure. If you do want to learn more, and I would say just general about Corteva's products, not only NovaGraze, but everything we have in the portfolio, or some of the specifics on some of the numbers we quoted there, you can go to rangeandpasture.com, and that will take you to Corteva's site there, focusing on range and pasture, talk about the products, talk about the people that we have in this business that we've been dedicated to for a long time. If not, we're going to wrap up. Brandy, I really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody on the call. Thanks for those behind the scenes that made this possible. Benny, Jerome, thank you for answering those questions. Folks, I hope you have a good growing season, good spring. Everything continues on. And if you have any questions for us, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. Y'all take care.
Having me.